Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the ACSI. This is their part number 1104. It's their 1104 version of the electrified hinge. ACSI doesn't manufacture hinges per se. They remanufacture other people's manufactured product. This hinge started out life as a McKinney TA2714, and it still is. But ACSI has taken it and done the 1104 preparation on this 4.5 steel-based 26D or 652 hinge. And ACSI can do this on any manufacturer that you like. You prefer BB11, 99s? They can do those. What I'm trying to say is, you prefer Hager? Great. Stanley? Great. Bomber? Great. They'll do them. McKinney is real common. Hager's real common. Stanley's real common. McKinney's pretty popular in terms of a hinge manufacturer, so you're going to run into it. If you have a specification that calls out electrified hinges, the job that they're doing is, I would believe, equal to every other manufacturer who does such work. Obviously, Hager will produce electrification on their hinges. I believe they do that in-house. I don't know that for a fact. But the point with ACSI is they electrify a lot of products, not just hinges. And we'll talk, about how to look at that stuff in a moment. So this is a regular TA2714. That's a steel-based hinge, full mortise, 5-knuckle, ball bearing, standard weight, garden variety hinge. Well, they've turned this into an 1104. The short version of that means that there are 4 wires, or 2 pair. I think it would be correct to call it 2 pair. There are 2 pair of wires coming through here. So 1104. Do you need 3 pair? Fine. It's 1106. How about 4 pair? Great. 1108. 1100-10, 1100-12, 10, 12 wire can be done. So be mindful, they can handle it. You've got a nylon coating over the wires where it's going to come in contact with the preparation that's been done in the door and frame, help insulate any stress that you put on the assembly from sharing these 28 gauge wires, which is what they are. Okay. Interestingly enough, I had a client call me this morning, and his exact words were, "I'm getting pushback from my hardware supplier about using a Hager hinge with a Von Duprin exit device." And I said, well, what type of pushback? And he said that the distributor said, well, the wire colors are different and it just doesn't match, and I think you really need to stick with the whatever was specified, etc. And I said, well, I can't really explain the pushback. I said I would expect the pushback to have been, wait a minute, let's make sure that these products are compatible. And the example that I gave was Von Duprin exit devices. Not all of them, but many of them have a substantial amount of inrush current, 16 amps, to pull back a solenoid-driven exit device. The 16 amps is unimaginably high in terms of what it would take to cause damage in terms of a amount of amperage running through wires. So I said to the client, well, you want to find out what the inrush amperage is and then your continuous amperage. Make sure that the hinge can handle it, or it's rated for those characteristics, meaning, are the wires rated for it? Are they thick enough is the bottom line. Just so happens I get an ACSI hinge later in the day, and here's the important stuff. 28 gauge wires, rated at 3.5 amp continuous, 16 amp pulse. So that means, I'm thinking of a regular 99 series exit device. Yeah, this is going to work very compatibly with that. Why the client might be looking at an alternative manufacturer like ACSI versus Hager very likely is lead time, or it's very likely cost. And the end user is talking to his hardware guy saying, why you got me getting these Hager hinges? Hager's great. they've been in business since Polk was president, and that's not an exaggeration. My family's been working with them since the 1970s. I'm a big fan. But at the same time, if you can't hang your doors and it's 10 degrees outside, you need hinges. And I think the argument was cost and lead time. I need to move now. I need to get doors swinging now. And I simply explained to them, well, the wire color, does that matter so much? Because it's all defined here, what you're dealing with. And I did tell the client, the caller, listen, your hardware guy may be new to low voltage electricity. It's not for someone who's been on the job a month or two or a year or two. It's something learned. So I just think that advice may have been askew, honestly incorrect, or intentionally slanted to divert someone from a certain path. Back to the ACSI. We talked about how many wires and how that comes up with the part number. In this link, there is a link below this video to the installation instructions, which are included, and then to the template, which we'll get to in a moment. Installation instructions tell us everything about the hinge that's important. The most important stuff we've already covered. That's what it was. This client needed 4.5 by 4. Only ACSI had them, and he could only get his hands on ACSI hinges in that 4.5 by 4. That's what it was. We talked about the electrical characteristics or the specifications of what the hinge is rated for, the quantity of wires given the part number, and the wire gauge of all of them. If you needed a thicker wire gauge because you were going to pump a lot more amperage through there on a continuous basis than you would normally otherwise, ACSI can handle that. Reach out to us and we'll get with them and find out what a good part number will be. Send us your electrical requirements. The bottom line is a pair of the wires are going to get a lot thicker. Steel hinges are used for interior use only. Brass or fire-rated applications. Brass or stainless would be best for exterior and non-rated installations. Don't disassemble anything. Don't take anything apart. Don't drive that pin out. It's not meant to come out. You can't take it out. There is literally a hole that's here that is drilled through that leaf, and those wires are run down through the entire, I'm doing it on the back side, through here, down through this assembly, or maybe, yeah, it's definitely down in this case, back through to this wire, where they have fed those wires through. Don't try to disassemble any of this. The through wire hinges are non-load bearing and must be mounted in the center position. 70% of the weight of the door is borne or held by that top hinge. Don't put a non-load rated hinge in that position at all, whether it be a wide throw hinge or an electric transfer hinge or something that's not specifically intended to carry the weight of the door. Center position is what they're saying. If it's an 8-foot door or taller, probably the second from the bottom might be where you want that to come through, depending on the design of the door and where you're going to pull wires to and from. ACSI also offers a mortar guard. Their part number 302-03-03, which you're going to want to have brought in behind your frame. A mortar guard is simply nothing other than a piece in a hollow metal frame application, a piece of metal that literally gets welded to the back side of the hinge so that you close off the preparation for the hinge so that when the frame is brought to the job site, it is placed where it's going to be located. It's probably shot down to the floor with a stud gun or a Hilti type tool. You're going to bring your courses of block or brick up to it on either side. As I'm laying my courses of block, I'm taking my trowel and I'm just packing mortar in there, right? That mortar is going to get everywhere. So you have to have a mortar guard to insulate the back side of this from coming in contact with any of that. You have to have a mortar guard. This may be a poor man's version of that would be some white foam insulation. I have gone to job sites and they're putting stuff up without mortar guards, and I'm like, why are you doing that? Well, we had to have the frames. They only had drywall frames, so they welded drywall frames. Stop. Get some duct tape. Run over to Home Depot and get some rigid white foam, cheap insulation. Cut all that stuff. Put it in there and duct tape it down. Keep filling it. And I didn't come up with that idea. Old Mason told me that, you know, a million years ago. You have to have a mortar guard one way or another. Door and frame must be prepped in accordance with the model template, the model's template, and let's click on the link below this video to indeed that template. And that's going to give you really the location of where you need to prep to have the wire stud coming out of on either side. That's going to need to be a hole. That's going to be 3/4 inch. They you know, I'm not sure why they're showing it in 4 locations. You need it in 2. Typical 4 places? I suppose you could drill all 4 places in your hinge plate if you're not really sure where your end user is going to put the hinge. I would think that someone's going to really want that label so that it's readable. A requirement of a fire assembly or a fire inspection is going to require readable labels. You know, depending on how you're going to install that hinge, you might need to run those upside down, I suppose, or the other way. And that's going to tell you where to drill those holes. Clean those holes out, and when you pull the wires through, don't snag anything. I mean, it's 28 gauge wire. I mean, that looking at it stern enough, I think you run the risk of potentially damaging it. So back to the installation instructions. Hang the door with your other hinges. Get the door swinging without using a non-load rated hinge like this through wire hinge. Extract the wiring through the holes prepared in the door and frame, and then make all your connections with either the crimp splices or tiny little wire nuts. Get that all tucked back properly out of the way I was taught to do it by people who are electricians. They would always, you know, you have to make sure that it all fits where it has to go, but you would take them small little wire nuts and you'd get it all electric taped up so it's nice and secure and solid, so that when the next person comes, it's not dealing with a rat's nest of mess that's there. Leave a tidy professional installation. Get the door hung, get your wires terminated, and that would conclude installing it. Optional connectors: ACSI Electrolinks, Allegiant Connect, and Hager Quick Connect. You can order these with the simple plug and play, snap them together connections, like an Ethernet jack. Male, female, obviously. If you're doing a job with ACSI or with Allegiant and Hager, order them that way. Life is super easy. Click, click, click. You don't make any mistakes. No wire nuts. No crimpings. If you, however, need to identify the wires that you're dealing with, you've got the legend at the top here. A 2 pair of wires is going to be for when you really are just connecting one item. If you're going to connect 2 items, I'd get a 6-wire or even an 8-wire hinge. 6-wire hinges are generally not stock, but you'll find 4-wire all the time, and then maybe only 8-wire, or you'll find 4-wire and then 12-wire. You want to have a pair set of wires, absolutely guaranteed. Absolutely. I would have a pair set. I would have a spare pair of wires for every connection that I'm making, because they do get damaged. What are you going to electrify with this? An electric hinge is going to allow you to elegantly conceal where those wires are coming from and where they're going to. That can be a single door where you are electrifying an electric latch retraction exit device. We do those all the time, where you have to have card control, access control over a service door that's going to be used 1,000 times a day. I wouldn't use this hinge for that. I'd use a heavyweight, certainly. Probably stainless base material. And you're going to have your card reader. It's going to communicate from your power supply. You're going to run power to your exit device. As you add other functionality, well, you could have that same scenario just to a push button at someone's desk. You can have an electrified lock, a push button, power supply. You need a pair of wires for that. As you add functionality, you need more wires. Let's say, for instance, you add a request to exit switch, also known as an RX switch. So what happens now is I have a panic device that has an RX switch, and I hit it, and that RX switch can communicate back to a central station that says, hey, this door has just been opened. No big deal. It's just an alert, perhaps visual or visual and audible only. You could also get fancier, have 2 RX switches. I want to report back to someone, plus I need to be able to hit the panic device and communicate to the magnetic lock that's above me. Now you need more wires. You could have all of that and then add an electric door operator as well, because you can have the ability for someone to hit that keypad, and you need to be able to pull that latch back before the operator starts to pull that door open. So, consider how many wires that you might end up needing. If it's an absolute basic installation, 4 wires is going to be adequate. But you could add up the wires real quick and real fast. Other than cost and possibly lead time, I would opt for having a lot more wires than I would otherwise need, because they are small. Finally, there is a link below this video to the manufacturer's page. Screws are included, all wood, all machine. There's a link to the manufacturer's page below this video where you can view not only all the ACSI products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website and their full product catalog, which is really handy to have there as well. They can electrify these hinges based on what the manufacturer will supply. So if you need polished stainless steel, okay, if your hardware manufacturer of choice makes that hinge, ACSI ought to be able to electrify it. I've spoken to them on the phone. They are really quick with knowing what they do, and they're exceptional at it, and I will reach for an ACSI product every single time I have the chance to. Any questions on the ACSI 1104 modified McKinney TA2714 4.5 by 4.5? And by the way, regarding the hinge size, the height is the first dimension, the width is the second dimension. Maybe that doesn't matter, but I promise you that it does matter. The client that I mentioned earlier with 4.5 by 4, it's really important to know that the height is the first dimension when you're making doors and frames. That's not 4 by 4.5. It's 4.5 by 4. Aluminum storefront most likely. So be mindful of the size. 2060, this is satin chrome steel based. Any questions on this or any other ACSI product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.